Let me start this video off with something practical. Over the last few months, I've been seriously thinking about my own career path. Not hypothetically, not philosophically, but in real time. I'm currently finishing a computer science degree. I am graduating in December, and I've been watching AI compress entire job categories. But I've been trying to answer this very simple question. How does the system actually decide who gets paid now? Because if you're a student, a recent grad, or trying to build a career in a creative or a technical field, this isn't something that's abstract. You're inside this system too. And here's the first thing that I learned. If I handed you a perfect resume today, written by the best AI, your pick of the bunch, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, whatever, and it was optimized for every single keyword, formatted completely flawlessly, just every recruiter's dream resume, it wouldn't mean what it used to. Not because you did something wrong, but because in 2026, anyone can generate a competent resume on demand. The labor market didn't just get more competitive. It actually became unverifiable. Employers aren't struggling to find talent. They're struggling to tell what's real. Degrees can be faked, resumes can be generated, and all these portfolios can be padded, especially with AI. So the rules changed really, really quickly. So if your value can't be verified in public, it effectively doesn't exist. So this video isn't going to be career advice or anything. It's just going to be a discussion about the system and an attempt to map how value, identity, and income are actually being decided right now in the AI economy. So I like to call this framework the sovereign creator patch. And not because, it's like trendy or whatever, but because it's the only patch that I've found that actually might resolve this bug. So let's talk about the bug. The entry-level job market didn't just disappear. It actually broke. Like in real time, we all watched it break. And that's just because there's a logic error at the foundation of the system. For decades, entry-level jobs existed as a buffer. You were slow, you made mistakes, but you were human, and that was acceptable because there was no cheaper alternative. That assumption has since been eradicated completely. Cost of human labor for basic cognitive tasks is now higher than the cost of AI compute doing the exact same work. So, because that equation flipped, the old model needed to collapse. AI didn't just get better, it actually became cheaper as well. And when something becomes cheaper and faster at the same time, markets don't debate. They reroute. And that's why it doesn't feel like the door closed. It feels like it completely vanished altogether. So I don't think that what we're going through is a recession, and I don't think it's cyclical or anything. I just think it's structural development. Entire categories of work are being completely removed from the bottom of the ladder at the exact moment that millions of people are trying to step onto the ladder itself. The roles that are disappearing are mostly administrative or junior or coordination heavy. They're jobs where the value came from following instructions, moving information around, or executing somebody else's plan. These are things that AI can do very, very easily. So I do think that at the same time, lots of new roles are emerging, but they don't really look like traditional jobs. They're oversight roles, so things like architecture roles or decision-making roles, roles where you don't do the work, but you decide which work needs to be done. So here's the part that I think catches most people off guard, especially when I have conversations with my friends about our thoughts and feelings on AI. You can't apply into that gap. That's why all the career advice that we see on the internet kind of feels broken or out of touch, because it is. The degrees still exist and they no longer function as like proof of capability. At best, they probably provide like compliance or something. They show that you completed a process, not that you can operate inside of a live system. Employers already understand this. Students are the ones that are left behind to catch up. And this creates what I like to call the paper ceiling. You can do everything right on paper and still be effectively invisible in practice, which leads to the real shift. The 9 to 5 isn't just harder to access. It is literally the fact that the protocol itself is being deprecated as we speak. Companies are no longer hiring for potential, they're hiring for this thing called agentic proficiency. That means the ability to direct AI, evaluate outputs, make decisions, and take responsibility for the result itself. So if your value comes from following instructions, an agent already does that better. you will be replaced by AI. This brings us to how value works now. In 2026, the market doesn't just pay for effort. It doesn't pay for time, and it definitely doesn't pay for hustle. It pays for architecture. Architecture means deciding what gets built, what tools are used, what success looks like, and what trade offs are acceptable. AI didn't just come and eliminate work, it eliminated execution as a differentiator. So the work that remains has to be judgment. That's why people who understand systems are being amplified right now, while people who only know how to operate from inside are being effectively compressed. And I know that this part is uncomfortable to speak about, it's uncomfortable to know about, but it's really important to have this discussion. AI doesn't replace everyone. It deletes the bottom, compresses the middle, and supercharges the top. If your role is to execute tasks defined by someone else, your leverage will trend towards zero. If your role is to design the system that those tasks live in, your leverage multiplies. And this is why competing with AI is the worst possible framing to work in. You're not supposed to outrun the bot. You're supposed to become the person directing it. If your value comes from following a manual, an agent already does that. So the only durable move is to become the architect. It's to become the person who writes the manual in the first place. And I think this is the part where most people tend to get uncomfortable or lost or confused. In my opinion, the future is all about personal branding. So let's be precise about that actually. This is not about, chasing clout, it's not about building an aesthetic, it's not about becoming an influencer or a content creator. This is simply just about verification. AI came and it made content virtually infinite. Information is no longer scarce, opinions are no longer scarce, answers are no longer scarce. What is scarce is identity. What's scarce is consistency over time. What's scarce is a visible history of thinking, building, and correcting mistakes. So, this is why resumes have completely stopped working, if you ask me. A PDF is totally static. It has no timestamps, no iteration history, no proof of work altogether. Anyone can go to ChatGPT and generate a resume that's perfect instantly. A personal brand, however, when it's done correctly, is not marketing. It's a public ledger. It's a timestamp record of what you tried, what worked, what didn't work, and how your understanding and honestly, your growth has progressed over time. And here's where we have the advantage. AI can generate an answer, but it cannot fake history. That's why trust is shifting completely away from institutions and towards individuals who document their process in public. Not because they're perfect, but because they're auditable, because they're relatable, because they're verifiable. When you build in public, you leave receipts. You create evidence that says, look at me, I'm someone who understands the system because I've been inside it. Your brand isn't some sort of performance, it's a public ledger. In a world flooded with synthetic output, proof of work becomes the most. And that is what I mean by a sovereign creator. Not someone with 10,000 followers on Instagram or TikTok or something, but someone whose work, thinking, and income can be verified without permission. Now, let's talk about money. Because sovereignty doesn't just stop at identity, it ends at settlement. You can't be sovereign if your payments are slow. You can't be sovereign if your income is reversible. And you definitely can't be sovereign if a third party can freeze or delay your earnings. Legacy banking introduces latency, fees, counterparty risks, you name it. It was built for the era of institutions and not the era of global individuals. As our work continues to get more digital and more global, our money has to follow. And I think this is why many creators, freelancers, and even developers are moving towards neutral, programmable settlement layers like Bitcoin. And obviously not as speculation, but as infrastructure, as a foundational layer. So instant settlement definitely matters. Finality matters. And we spoke about this in more detail on Tuesday. So definitely check that video out if you haven't yet. But I think especially when your work crosses borders, platforms, and even time zones with the internet, waiting a week to get paid is not normal. It's not gonna cut it anymore. It's a latency error. In a sovereign system, value moves at the speed of the internet. So here's the full picture. The old economy asked for permission. The new economy, however, asks for proof or proof of work. If you don't have a public record of what you're thinking, who you are, what you're building, the system will still continue to decide who you are. It will just do it without you. And not because it's malicious or has any intent that's like out to get you or anything, but because it needs data. It needs data to prove that you've done something. And if there's no data for it to look at, then your value is diminished. In a world where content is infinite and execution is cheap, the only thing that truly compounds is a visible history of judgment. Not credentials, not university degrees, judgment. That is what markets are actually pricing now. This isn't about becoming famous. This is about becoming legible. This is about becoming a verifiable identity. It's about making your thinking, your work, your decisions understandable and accessible to other humans and to the systems that are increasingly mediating opportunity. Some people will sit around and they'll wait for all those old paths to reopen, for the idea of working a 9 to 5 corporate job to become inspiring and honestly just appealing again. But others will quietly start leaving receipts. And that difference isn't going to show up immediately, but over time, they will compound in very different directions. I don't think that we're early. I think we are currently sitting in the midst of the transition, and the people who document it are going to be the ones who understand. I'm documenting the shift as it happens. So if you enjoyed today's video, please let me know. Any discussion in the comments is always a good thing. I welcome all sorts of sentiment, good and bad. Feedback is always something that is appreciated and honestly wanted more than compliments and praise. But with that being said, as always, stay curious, stay skeptical, and stay orange-pilled. I'm your host, Nikki, and I will see you next week.